conducting a workshop specifically on a client that I worked with who um, was struggling with erectile dysfunction, weight gain, uh, lethargy, kind of lack of motivation in general. And I'm going to kind of go through this step by step and analyze men's hormones, which I will say is an area of hormonal health that doesn't get a lot of playtime. So, this client of mine, I'm going to name him Paul. That's not his real name, but to protect him, I'll call him Paul. So, he was just struggling with about 30 pounds of weight that he just couldn't lose. And honestly, he was just unmotivated to even do exercise, change his diet, really anything to even lose the 30 pounds in the first place. He was just so worn out. Paul was 45 years old. He'd just gotten married to a woman who is about 15 years younger than him, and they were hoping to start a family. But again, just overall, he wasn't feeling very well. And he had high LDL cholesterol, which is considered kind of the bad cholesterol. Um, and he was suffering from symptoms of erectile dysfunction. So, throughout the time that Paul and I worked together, there were some pretty remarkable transformations that happened. In today's workshop, I'm going to go through the different hormones that we really want to be paying attention to, specifically for men, and the different tests that I use in my practice. If you're a guy who's struggling with your hormones, or if you love a guy who's struggling with their hormones, this workshop is definitely for you. So, about 50% of my clientele are men over 40. And I find that this group of people is oftentimes really actually ignored in the hormone conversation overall. So we talk a lot about women's hormones, as we should. Women suffer a great deal from hormonal imbalances, but men do as well. And the struggles that men have with their hormones look a bit different than women's do. The nice thing, if you will, about women's hormones is that a woman can track her hormones to a certain extent. If she is still in that fertile season of life, she gets her menstrual cycle, she can kind of pay attention to what's going on there. But for men, they don't really have that goalpost. And it can make it quite a bit more difficult for them to really know what's going on with their hormones, and to really start to correlate the fact that the lethargy that they're feeling around their waist actually may be driven by their hormones. And this is especially true of men over 40. So as women go into menopause, men go into what's known as andropause. So essentially, as men age, their testosterone levels in particular start to lower. Similar thing happens for women with estrogen and progesterone levels. Now, what we also know, though, is that there's something called functional andropause, which is affecting more and more young men. And this looks a little bit different than andropause does. Functional andropause, again, affecting younger men, is again oftentimes lower testosterone levels, and oftentimes accompanied by other metabolic symptoms, blood sugar dysregulation, irregular cholesterol levels. Again, very similar to what I was seeing with my client Paul. So, what we want to be really cognizant of in this conversation, and I see this happening over and over and over again with my male clients, is that people can kind of get stuck on testosterone and not realize that there is a much bigger picture at play. So, absolutely, we're going to be talking a lot about testosterone today, but I really want to dig deeper to understand what all of the systems at play are for men who are trying to optimize their hormones. And a lot of men that I have worked with have gone the route of medicating with testosterone, which for some men works great. It's a simple solution. Uh, for a lot of men, it doesn't fix the problem. A lot of their symptoms remain. They continue to struggle with weight gain around their middle. They continue to struggle with erectile dysfunction. They continue to struggle with their energy. Their mood is oftentimes affected. So we really, again, we want to dig a little bit deeper and understand what's causing those testosterone imbalances in the first place. So again, for those of you who are just joining, I'm going to be doing a case study today on a client of mine. I'll name him Paul. That's not his real name. But Paul was suffering with symptoms of erectile dysfunction, pretty significant lethargy, lack of motivation. He was struggling at work. He had just recently gotten married and he wanted to have children with his wife. But certainly they were struggling in that department due to some of the hormonal imbalances that he was having. So let's take a moment and review the specific hormones that I'm going to be talking about as I go through Paul's case study with you. So first and foremost, when we're talking about men's hormones, we're talking about a group of hormones called androgens. So androgens are male hormones. They are what produce what we would attribute to men's features and helps to produce sperm, facial hair, muscle tone, etc. And then we also have DHT, which is kind of a concentrated form of an androgen, and then androstenedione, which all three of those come from DHEA, which is an androgen, or excuse me, which is an adrenal hormone. Okay. And this is really, really important. I'm going to be talking quite a lot about adrenals and stress today. And this month, I'm focusing on men's health for the whole month. June is Men's Health Month. And every Thursday at 5:45 for the month of June, I'm going to be talking about specifically men's hormones and different tools that you can utilize to help either support your own hormones if you're a guy, or if you love a guy, these tools will really be of help to you. So in addition to androgens, we also want to talk about estrogen, which for a lot of people who are somewhat familiar with hormones, they think, estrogen is only for the ladies, right? And that is not at all true. And I will tell you that this is one of the biggest missing factors in a lot of hormone protocols for men, is that we're not including this very, very important balance between estrogen and testosterone. And I'm going to be explaining why that balance is so incredibly important in order to help to naturally restore testosterone levels for men. And I will give you a little teaser and tell you that after 3 months of Paul and I working together, and we've retested his hormones. I always retest hormones to make sure that we are getting the job done. His hormones and his testosterone levels had come back to normal, and his erectile dysfunction had improved by 85%. So this stuff really does work. So let's touch base again on adrenal hormones. So when we're looking at the hormone cascade, the male hormone cascade, the adrenal glands produce two hormones that we can test. They produce a lot of other hormones, but the two hormones that we can actually test are DHEA and cortisol. For Paul, his DHEA was a little bit low, and his cortisol was also a little bit low. So we call DHEA the kind of the feel-good hormone. And what we know about DHEA is that in the flow of hormone production. DHEA sits at the top. In other words, if your adrenal glands are not functioning properly, it's going to be difficult for you to then produce an optimal amount of testosterone because you don't have the building blocks of that DHEA in place. Also, the last hormone that we want to be aware of for men's health is progesterone. And specifically for men, progesterone is produced entirely by the adrenal glands. So, really, when I'm looking at a hormone panel for a guy and I see that progesterone as being low, that's immediately cueing me that the adrenal glands are struggling and then we need to support them specifically. I'm going to be doing a whole workshop this month on adrenal health specifically and how it works in conjunction with men's hormones. So I'm not going to get into that a whole lot today. But what I will say is that when you're thinking adrenal glands, think adrenaline, think stress. Okay. A lot of us are in kind of a constantly stressed state. And we don't realize the significant impact that that is having on our health overall, but is also having on our body's ability to produce hormones. Okay. And what's great about these hormone panels that I use in my practice is that I can actually see the impact that stress is having on that hormone production by looking at some of these adrenal markers. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about estrogen. So I mentioned that when we're talking about optimizing men's hormones, we really need to be talking about estrogen. We can't just talk about testosterone or we're going to be missing half of the picture. So there is a process called aromatization. This is driven by the aromatase enzyme. And what's interesting about this is that the aromatization enzyme, or the process of aromatization, actually converts testosterone into estrogen. That aromatase enzyme is produced in fat. So, what I'll oftentimes see with my male clients who are struggling with some of these hormonal imbalances is that they're carrying extra weight around their middle. They have extra fat around their abdomen. And this is sort of a catch 22. So, the more fat that you have around your abdomen, the more aromatase enzymes you're making. And therefore, the more conversion is happening of testosterone being converted into estrogen, which, by the way, having when you're a guy, having your testosterone levels converted into estrogen is not a good thing. Okay. And simultaneously, the more estrogen that either a man or a woman has, okay, if it's outside of what we would consider lab range, so if you're suffering from high levels of estrogen, what that will end up doing is causing you to gain more weight, okay? So if you're stuck in this cycle of producing too much estrogen, you're also then stuck in a cycle of continually battling weight around your middle. Women who are in menopause uh, are very familiar with this. A lot of women who are going through menopause know exactly what I'm talking about. Okay. So that creates a scenario known as estrogen dominance. And here again, we can see this playing itself out on a male hormone panel. So let's go back to Paul. Again, Paul is struggling with erectile dysfunction. He is really, really exhausted. He's lacking in motivation and suffering from erectile dysfunction. So Paul's panel came back with him having low DHEA, low cortisol. Okay, so again, those are two adrenal specific markers. And as a reminder, when we're looking at kind of that hormone cascade, the production of testosterone in men depends on the health of the adrenal glands. Okay, so the fact that his adrenal glands are not able to produce enough hormones is immediately a red flag to me that he's then not able to produce testosterone in a healthy, functional way. Not surprisingly, then, his testosterone levels were below lab normal range. And also, not surprising, his estrogen levels were actually above lab normal range for a man. Okay, so Paul was really kind of your classic presentation of um, reduced adrenal function, high estrogen levels, and low testosterone levels. In addition, Paul also had high LDL cholesterol, which is considered like the bad cholesterol, driven by inflammation. What's interesting about this is that erectile dysfunction and the um, drivers of that are also driven by inflammation. So, if you're struggling with erectile dysfunction, just understand that that's as difficult as that is. And it is so, so difficult for the men who are struggling with that. It is also a signal to you that there are other things going on, that your body needs support and help in other ways as well. Okay. So, I ran a blood chemistry panel on Paul as well, and what I discovered there was that his thyroid hormones were a bit low as well. Um, Research tells us that hypothyroidism, which is reduced thyroid production, is a condition where the thyroid does not produce enough thyroid hormones. Hypothyroidism can be a contributing factor for low testosterone levels. So, as we support the thyroid and help the thyroid to produce more hormones, that also will help to boost testosterone levels. Okay. So, as I said earlier, when I started this workshop, I said, so often what I see with my male clients is that they went straight for medicating with testosterone. Okay. For some men, that works great and they're off to the races. For a lot of men, it doesn't. And so I would encourage you to kind of broaden your perspective of this and realize that the endocrine system, the system of hormones, there are a lot of different factors, a lot of moving parts. So if you're a guy who has low testosterone levels, but you also are suffering from hypothyroidism, even if try to boost those testosterone levels, it's a bit of a band-aid because you're not addressing the other core factors that are in place, again, like this hypothyroid piece. Okay. uh, Last test that I oh, and then specifically for Paul, the other thing that I found on his blood chemistry panel was that his A1C was high. So A1C is a measurement of blood sugar. It looks at about a 3-month average of blood sugar. And blood sugar issues contribute to inflammation. I'm going to do a whole workshop on this month so that I can explain to you how blood sugar and men's hormones correlate. I'm not going to get into the weeds of that today. But just bank that and come back to see that workshop later on this month. So, so let's review what I've got for Paul so far. His hormones are struggling. Okay. He's making too much estrogen. He's not making enough testosterone, and his adrenals are struggling. They're not making enough hormones. His thyroid is struggling. And we're also seeing that he's struggling with some blood sugar imbalances. Lastly, I ran a gut panel on him, and that gut panel revealed quite a lot of information. Uh, Whenever I work with men or women on balancing their hormones, I always start with a gut panel. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But specifically for Paul, what's interesting here is that there is a marker on the GI map, which is the stool test that I use in my practice. That GI map showed that he had high levels of an enzyme called beta glucuronidase. And the reason that's important is because when a person has high levels of beta glucuronidase, they are less likely to be able to detoxify estrogen. So when we're trying to figure out why Paul's body is producing more estrogen, one contributing factor is actually coming from his gut. Okay. Okay, so Let's talk about what we did for Paul to help him out with this. So, again, Paul's goals are to get more energy. He's been feeling very unmotivated, very lethargic. He's been suffering from erectile dysfunction. He and his wife want to have children. They're worried about that because of the issues that he's having. And he also has high LDL levels. So, taking all of these test results into consideration, we curated a protocol specifically for him. And I want to explain in detail what we did so that for those of you who are listening, you can start putting some of these tools into place right away. I mentioned earlier that when we're thinking about erectile dysfunction, we really need to step back and consider how inflammation is contributing to that symptom presentation, is contributing to that erectile dysfunction. In the case of Paul, he has a couple of different markers that are pointing to inflammation. Again, he's got those blood sugar issues that are coming up, and he's got that cholesterol issue that's coming up. So, first and foremost, we want to be talking about his diet. Okay? A lot of people in the United States tend to eat a very processed diet, and people eat a lot of sugar. The fats that they eat are not healthy. Okay, so eating a lot of fried food. Um, there's not very many nutritious foods in their diet, so there's not a lot of vegetables and there's not a lot of fruit. Keep in mind that vegetables and some fruit have an incredible amount of nutrients in them, vitamins and minerals. And if you look up, you could just Google this. What is one of the most important things that you can do to help with sperm count, for instance? And you'll read that zinc is really important for sperm count, magnesium, very important for erectile dysfunction as well. So, a lot of people, their diet is just completely depleted of vitamins and minerals. And that is first and foremost one of the biggest issues that we need to address. But then again, we also need to take out inflammatory foods, sugar, again, these unhealthy fats. But then I also run a food sensitivity test in my practice so that we can actually identify exactly what foods your body is having an inflammatory response to. And unfortunately, and this is a bit counterintuitive for a lot of people, sometimes really healthy foods people are having an inflammatory reaction to, and that's because their digestive system is compromised and their immune system has started to react to the foods that they're eating. So, first and foremost, we want to be addressing that food component. There's some research out there that suggests that food sensitivities are also a factor in sperm count. Okay, that food sensitivities are a huge contributing factor for autoimmune diseases and this condition in which the body starts to attack itself. So when we're thinking about how to really holistically, deeply support men's hormones, we really need to be thinking about that inflammation piece. We need to be understanding how food and also how the digestive system is influencing the body's ability to deal with inflammation, but also the body's ability to fuel you and to fuel your production of hormones. And working with the gut microbiome is absolutely pivotal for balancing hormones, whether that's for men or for women. I mentioned with Paul that he had high beta glucuronidase levels. And what that does is it makes it difficult for the body to detox estrogen. We start to see those estrogen levels rising up. So, things that you can do right away to help support your gut microbiome: eat fermented vegetables. Make sure that those fermented vegetables are actually coming from the fridge section of your grocery store and not from the canned goods section. Fermented vegetables have a ton of probiotics in them, and it really helps to restore the balance of your gut microbiome. I do an incredibly deep dive uh, supplement approach to microbiome in my gut healing program. That's a 4-month program where we take the results of the GI map and do a full gut microbiome makeover. So certainly fermented vegetables are an excellent, excellent start, but also keep in mind that depending on what's going on with your microbiome, you may need higher level support, higher level makeover for your gut. In turn, this allows you again to better absorb the vitamins and minerals that you're consuming. And really key factor here for hormonal health is fat. And again, I mentioned that so many people are eating what we would call denatured fats. So trans fats, which does not help with, my client Paul and his LDL levels and inflammation. Even canola oil, I am not a fan of. We really want to be focusing on olive oil, avocados, nuts, etc., for those really healthy fats. Uh, Next piece, looking at liver function and detoxification. Again, this is going to be driven by that healthy diet, but we can also bring in additional supplemental supports in order to help take care of the liver. The liver is just such an incredibly amazing organ. It has over 500 functions. And one of the many things that it does is helps the body to detox estrogen. So again, when we're trying to figure out what's going on with Paul and why his estrogen levels are so high, we really need to consider taking care of his liver. And interestingly enough, the liver really, really needs an ample amount of protein every day. I will tell you that the majority of the people that I work with do not eat enough protein, number one. And then number two, they oftentimes don't have the digestive function to actually break that protein down. Protein needs a lot of digestive fire in order to get broken down. I did a whole workshop series on that. If you're interested in that, get in touch with me and I'd be happy to send you the recording for that. Hydration. This another huge big ticket item. Most people are not drinking enough water. It's so important to drink at least half your weight in ounces of water per day, plus 1.5 ounces of water per half an ounce of diuretic that you drink per day. So diuretics would be coffee, alcohol. Okay, most people are severely dehydrated. So that's a really, really important aspect, especially of detoxification. The body needs to be hydrated in order to detox well. Okay. Adrenal support. So as you might recall, Paul's panel showed that his adrenals were really struggling. His cortisol levels were low. They were low specifically in the morning. As the day went on, his cortisol levels started to normalize, but they were low in the morning, which was contributing to him just feeling like so exhausted in the morning and not at all excited to start his day. And so when we're looking at that adrenal, looking at that adrenal component, again, you really need to consider that the adrenal glands are our fight or flight glands. So dealing with stress, building in stress management, stress relief practices into your life, if you're a man or a woman, you really need to take this so seriously. The body is going to struggle to produce hormones and also be able to balance hormones if the adrenal glands are not working properly. Okay, that's just a given. Okay. And then the last piece is the supplements piece. And this is a piece that people get really confused about. And I always, strive to clarify this as much as I possibly can. There are supplements like vitamin D, for instance, right? Or magnesium or calcium. Okay. These are like basic nutrient cofactors that everybody needs to hopefully be consuming in their diet. A lot of people are not. Okay. But those are sort of the supplements that people are most familiar with. What most people are not familiar with are the supplements specifically for addressing hormonal imbalances. These supplements are incredibly, incredibly powerful. And I would strongly encourage you to not take these supplements unless you have had a professional run a hormone panel for you and specifically curate that supplement protocol for you, because they will have a huge effect on your hormones. Okay. And those are the kinds of supplements that I use in my practice. So let's talk about what happened with Paul. Um, Paul and I ended up working together for 6 months, but I retested his hormones after 3 months because I wanted to see how his supplement protocol was going. Again, as I just mentioned, these supplements are incredibly powerful, and I don't want to um, overpower the body and kind of overshoot our goal here. Okay, so um, after 3 months, well, first and foremost, I'll say that Paul reported to me that his erectile dysfunction had improved by 85%, which is absolutely phenomenal. I was so happy to hear that. And he was certainly thrilled with those results as well. His cortisol levels continued to be low. So he and I really needed to talk about what his morning routine looked like and also needed to focus more on his sleep. Okay. He was working too late still at night. He didn't have a very good sleep routine. He was on his phone until late at night. So, his system did not have enough time to rest. And that can be such an important factor with these cortisol levels. His DHEA had returned to normal. It had previously been low. I had specifically brought in a low dose of DHEA to help support those levels. DHEA is a supplement that you absolutely do not want to mess around with. It's very powerful. And again, if you overshoot the mark with DHEA, it can cause other problems. So it's really important to dial that in. Um, his progesterone, estrogen, and testosterone levels all came back in normal range. So, as a reminder, when on our first test, his progesterone levels were low, which was a signal of adrenal issues. His estrogen levels were high, and his testosterone levels were low. Okay, so we saw massive changes in his hormones over that 3 month time period. What I will say is that upon that retest, his testosterone levels were in lab normal range, but they were still on really the low end of lab normal. So he and I then continued to work together, and I kept him on that testosterone boosting protocol for another 3 months to help kind of get those levels up. Meanwhile, Paul was really working hard to change his diet. As we all know, changing our diets is not an easy process by any means. It actually takes practice, and it takes messing up and trying again and learning how to do this, and he did that. And certainly his diet was not perfect. He had a lot of work meetings and that kind of thing that he had to jostle with and work around. But he really came up with a great program for himself and was able to incorporate a lot more fruits and vegetables and protein into his diet, which was really key. And then at 6 months, we're done. His testosterone levels were in fantastic place. And we still see each other occasionally to help him just kind of maintain where he's at. But his energy is at a really good level now, to the point where he is able to work out several times a week. He has lost 20 pounds. He still has 10 pounds to go. That's his goal, but he's lost 20, which is huge. And as I mentioned earlier, that consideration that we really are interested in is that weight gain around the middle. And he was able to start to really lose that fat around the middle, which helps as well to boost testosterone levels. So, um, amazing transformation for Paul. It was so much fun to work with him, and I would encourage any of you watching this, again, if you're a guy who's struggling with erectile dysfunction, if you're just feeling exhausted, sometimes men will feel like their mood has been really affected and they don't really know why, can't lose weight, all those things. Consider getting a hormone panel that covers all of the hormones that I mentioned in today's workshop. A lot of times when men get their hormones tested, the only hormone that is tested is testosterone. And as I mentioned, that's really missing so much of the bigger picture. And if you're interested in this topic, if you want to get the recording, please join my newsletter. I always send the recording of these workshops out in my newsletter on every Tuesday. So I'd be happy to send that to you. And next week, I'm going to be doing a workshop, same time, Thursday, 5:45, on blood sugar specifically and how blood sugar imbalances impact testosterone levels. So I would love, love, love to see you there. Thank you all so much for joining me. And let me see if there are any questions. Okay, so Gail is asking me, I have such a hard time getting through this. Gail is asking me, okay, my this is such a cute question. My husband is struggling to get his mojo back. Yeah. Yep. So Gail, sometimes age is a huge factor in this. And here again, step-by-step process that I laid out here today, really need to understand first and foremost what's going on with his hormones and then kind of work backwards from there. But please know, Gail, that there is absolutely help out there and that you can see enormous progress for him with this. Okay. All right. I think there are more questions here, but I am like the least tech savvy person in the whole world and they are disappearing. So if you asked me a question and I didn't get to you, I do apologize for that. If you want to get in touch with me, please uh, hop onto my bio on social media. You can join my newsletter, you can email us, and you can also join a future workshop. I'd love to see you. All right. Thank you all for being here tonight. Have a great night.